wonder with public speaking anxiety, which I think 99.9% of the population has, right? You can't not have it. So it's like, oh, why am I doing it? You know, because that anxiety comes up, right? And there really is only one answer to that, which is that some of the joy of living is that you love what you love. And you want to love what you love with people who love it, right? And that's why I keep coming back to Dharma talks, even though there is social anxiety and fear of public speaking. It's a great way to dwell in what I love. And I hope you have a love for it too. And my guess is you'd be in much more fun places if you didn't have some. So I wanted to talk about using discernment and the 5 aggregates of clinging. And I'll get to that in a minute. A lot of us are really old-timers here, so we certainly appreciate everyone who holds this up. Teresa's here, Brad, Corey, Joel back there. And in the old days, our teacher, Victor, would have us sing this chant at the end. Do you remember that, Teresa? Right? Remember the chant? I think it's from the Upanishads, and it's something like, lead us from the unreal to real, right? Lead us from darkness to the light. Lead us from the fear of death. And it's supposed to be knowledge of eternity. Well, my mind, I got to lead us from darkness to the light, you know, but the end was lead us from knowledge of insecurity. It never got the eternity word. But what I love about that chant is the first line, lead us from unreal to real. And you could say that about all the teachings of the Buddha, all the Dharma, everything that's written is always about leading us from the unreal to the real. And when we live in cities like LA or anywhere highly distracting, and we carry these things, they say they're cell phones, I call them time suckers, you know, these time, right? It's so easy to be living outside of ourselves, distracted in worlds, and not even knowing we're here, right? Not even coming from inside, from the body, from this sense of space and ease. So the teachings really serve to bring us from the unreal to the real. And today, this talk is about a series of conversations and Dharma talks I've been lucky enough to have with a Theravadan monk and scholar named Thanissaro Bhikkhu, also known as Ajahn Chah, who has a monastery in the hills of northern San Diego. Once in a while I get to hear him. And I wouldn't say this talk is a great reflection of his teachings. It's kind of more like if we were all playing jazz, this would be my version of a jazz piece, right? It's a riff off of being with Thanissaro Bhikkhu. And one of the things that he's been teaching in the past couple of months are on what we call the 5 aggregates of clinging, or the heaps, we would say. Doesn't sound interesting, but the thing that he is so good at is making these endless lists that we tend to have in Theravada relevant and useful, meaningful, and something you kind of want to explore and look at because it's got some juice to it. It's got something for you. And he talks about this concept to cultivate discernment. He uses two really good words, like a vocabulary test. What's a helpful word? One is discernment. With momentary discernment, we can pause, pivot, and know, right? What's skillful from unskillful. The other is this term that you've heard before, which is Metta Cognition. Right? Metta Cognition, that's that pausing and seeing, back to that, from darkness to light, seeing with clarity what's really happening, and that capacity to keep doing it. So those are two vocabulary words I'll be testing you on at the end of the talk. I want to see some A+ in here. I'll link to it. Okay, so what we're looking at, I'm going to tell you what these 5 heaps are. They make up all of existence, every moment. It's always happening. This is what creates our world. And I'll do them, let's see. I'll do them, succinctly. Form, which is the eye makes contact with the world and objects, right? That's where it starts. The form is also this body, right? Here, the body. So right away, I can say to you, my eye sees the blue in the stained glass, which I love. So now I'm jumped to feeling. That's the second heap of how I create my world. And we're all creating the world all the time. But first of all, you may not see the blue how I see the blue. So we're always creating a movie, as per the Buddha. And the next thing about it is I'm going to really love it. I love that blue. I may not like the blue or stained glass, or I may feel nothing. But it's always happening. At every moment, it's going on. But the next one is really more interesting, which is perception. And perception is, I see that stained glass. Well, how do I know it's stained glass? So I've got to dial up. I got to go into my Wikipedia. And the reason why this is so interesting is that we all have different Wikipedias based on our history of what we know to be true, right? And just because it was true 20 or 30 years ago doesn't mean it's true today, but we may still take it to be very true. And I'll give you an example of that in a moment or two, right? So that's perception. So there's form, feeling, perception, right? I look at that glass and maybe I remember that beautiful church in New York City, St. John the Divine, with this beautiful blue stained glass, and I go, oh, wow, so great, love it, right? I'm in a happy movie. But maybe I look at the stained glass and I remember something that happened at church that was embarrassing, right? So this Wikipedia, this calling up from the past, is coloring our present all the time. But we may not know it. So that's that word, the D word, remember, discernment, is to know it a little bit more. We get more choice and more freedom. The next one is really a very interesting word. I find fascinating, always fascinating. I call it the F word of Buddhism. Yeah. Fabrication, right? I'm calling it up from Wikipedia, right? My past impressions, Thanissaro Bhikkhu would say past life even, or the Buddha would say that, right? All these impressions. And now I'm going to add on and really up my game, right? I'm going to embellish it. And as I embellish it, I create a self in my story. I'm forming a self. So say we were, and let me just say the last one is consciousness, and that's the ability to be aware of everything we've just talked about, right? So you've got the 5. So it goes like this. Let's say we were meditating for 30 minutes and you feel a hunger pain. You didn't have lunch, right? And right away, you identify it as hunger because you had it stored in your memory. It's not appendicitis, it's hunger. Okay, I don't have to worry. And now the fabrication, we're creating someone who is hungry, right? And the next thing you know, it's like, pizza sounds good. I ought to go find a way to order up a pizza, right? But we're meditating, right? And then it's like, well, where do I go for pizza? How should I get delivery? Should I stop by? Should I call ahead? Maybe I'll put it on my phone. Who has good pizza? I want pizza that's like New York pizza. I don't want LA pizza. Or maybe I can look that up in, an app or something. One of those apps that can tell me. Or I think my cousin knows a place in Fountain Valley, right, that has pizza that's like New York pizza. You know what? It's a holiday for me. I don't have to work a lot tomorrow, so I could get my car and drive from Long Beach to Fountain Valley. There won't be traffic. It's not too bad. Well, maybe I should ask Marcia, right? And you see where we go, right? We are in the movie. There's nothing inherently wrong with being in the movie. It's fun to have pizza with Marcia on a Sunday in Fountain Valley, or whatever. But what the Buddha is pointing to is that when we live in this world of fabrication, we're living in a world of, it's a place for suffering and dukkha, because it's dependent upon something outside of me filling me up and entertaining me and giving me a sense of self, right? As a matter of fact, if this is great New York pizza, Marcia's going to be very impressed with me. And maybe I can put that on Facebook and show everybody that we got real pizza in California, See, we fill up. So when we talk about the 5 aggregates, the next vocabulary word I want to introduce students, right? I'm just joking. But I do want you to remember this word because I think it's brilliant, is food. We feed when we cling and feed, right? We have a tendency to, and I always reference this with myself as an example so that I'm being very honest in the presentation, not just intellectualizing it, but the feeding that we do is seeking an identity and a way to feel secure and safe and full and happy from all sorts of forms, objects, things. What do we say in 12-step programs? People, places, and things. We feed on it. And those things are conditional, impermanent, come and go. They come and go. Good days, bad days, right? And the more we cling and we try to fill, the more we really suffer because we're not in control of them. Whereas the Buddha is sort of leading us to what is unconditioned, not dependent on people, places, and things coming and going, but something that remains. That's here, this presence, this stillness, this here and nowness, this bare attention, right? This being with what's arising in an unconditioned way, and that there's a beautiful, sweet joy, peace, sweetness, lightness, happiness, love that you can really feel from practice. So we're cultivating the unconditioned, because this is not conditioned, right? Unreal to real. And it has depth and intimacy and the knowledge of the truth. And for those of you who are practicing, you kind of know this neighborhood, right? You know what I'm talking about. Now, what's really interesting about this teaching in Thanissaro Bhikkhu is he really upends it by saying, even practice is a fabrication. Even when we think we've got a little enlightenment, honey, you're fabricating, is kind of what he say, right? Even when you have an insight, it's fabricated. Your insight's going to come and go. You have a great meditation, the mind was still, the heart maybe was open, you felt this relaxation, this ease, this peace. It's going to end. All fabricated. But what he's teaching us is that we can use fabrications like a verb, like we're getting on the raft that the Buddha talks about to get to the other shore, right? We're using it skillfully to know and reach that unfabricated place. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So, 3 good words. Food, not as in pizza. Okay. Metta Cognition, the capacity to be with and see, right? To pause and know. And that discernment. All right. So, I'll tell you a little illustration of how this works in our lives, right? Well, and I want to say one other thing before I give you my illustration. He talks about 3 areas of attention, 3 doorways to see and know how to practice with this in an active way. And one is, and again, I am fabricating his teaching. So if you want to hear his teaching, listen to his teaching or read his books, because it's my fabrication. One is the body itself, right? The form. And we can use the body, the breath, or sensing and feeling the structure of the body. I like to feel into the bones of my body as a way to stay anchored in presence and breath, so we are close to meditation and we're not flying and jumping all over the place. You know? We're not lost in the world of objects. It's a skillful practice. And one of the things I like to do that I recommend doing is to create a habit of a slow walk wherever you are. You feel your feet, feel the breath, and feel the body, and come back to ground in the body and center, drop all the stuff, right, to come back in, so that we're inviting a stillness and a wakeful state, right? The second is awareness at the doorway of thought, which is an interesting one, and I'll talk more about that. But just how are you chattering to yourself? What are we saying? Right? Because a lot of times we're feeding and fabricating on ourselves. We're comparing and we're judging others, right? So you can see a little story making. You didn't know you were writing that screenplay, and there you were. You thought you were doing the laundry and the dishes and getting some bills paid, checking the internet, and God knows what else you were doing, right? But you didn't realize, oh, I'm also doing a screenplay. I don't like her. I don't like what she said. He's great. How can I go to that play? And, what's my neighbor doing now? Oh, they're so annoying, right? It's just this endless stream of da 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 da, right? Right? So you can use your discernment and your metta cognition at the doorway of your thought. But you can also use it at the doorway of speech. Not just wise speech as in the wise speech is in what's in the dharma, but in the Eightfold Path, but when we're speaking, where's the food? And this one really is a great one for me, because we can feed with people. Let me tell you my story. Let me tell you about me. Are you listening? Do you think I'm cool? Do you think I'm smart? Aren't I? Underlying. We're not saying that. We're acting that, right? We're coming from hunger, right? Or if it's a loved one, where we tend to be more hungry with the people we love, especially those of us who are parents. That's the place of big hunger, right? I need you to be a certain way with me. I want you to be I want you to listen to me. You ask me how my day was, right? Give me the answer I want, right? I need the conversation to be this way. I need this reaction from you. And a lot of times we're going back in our dialogue, in our speech, from old history, I like you because you remind me of my Aunt Eva, right? You have her coloring her face, so I kind of like you. It's a feeling tone of life. I don't like you because you remind me of my 4th grade teacher. I hated him, Mr. Right? But very often the difficulty is that we are unaware. We're in this habitual way of being. And the Buddha gives us that spark to wake up, to wake up out of it, unreal to real. So a couple of weeks ago, I was very fortunate to have a vacation and a retreat on the East Coast. It was really wonderful. I had a great time. And the retreat that I went on was not a meditation retreat. It was kind of half meditation, half psychology, that kind of frame. So there was a lot of talking and engaging. And it was in an old guest house, I guess they call it a guest house from like the 1700s, the 1800s. About 50 people, got 3 meals a day. Pretty Connecticut, autumn, and trees. It was really nice. And I had a wonderful time. And at the end of this retreat, I knew that I had to get on Amtrak, the train, and take a 2.5-hour train ride to New Jersey to get on a flight home back to California. And so, remember the 5 aggregates of clinging, form, feeling? The feeling was very unpleasant. It was like, I don't want to do this, right? But it was so interesting, the layers of consciousness and the impressions that we have. I had this wonderful time, and I was very grateful, but I woke up with a bad, sour mood, and I couldn't shake it. And I heard a little mind chatter in there of like, this is just too far away. Why am I doing this? And it's too expensive. And why am I going to a retreat in New York when I live in California? And it was sort of this muttering as I packed. And I know that when we talk about the perception, right? Amtrak does not, the word Amtrak, not a good perception, because a year or two ago, I got a ticket and my friend got a ticket, and my ticket was 3 times the price of hers. So Amtrak, don't like Amtrak. That was it. No Amtrak, So I'm already thinking in my head, my movie is about I don't like Amtrak. And there are trains all over the world that are better than Amtrak, I hear. China, Japan, Europe, right? Everybody's got a better train than Amtrak. And I'm just leaving in aversion, right? Which is a hindrance. And it took me like a long while to figure out the plot for this film, this movie that was rolling in my head. And I hope I can make the point here, right? I hope that this can be of interest. What was going on was I was raised by people who went through the Depression. Grandparents, or anybody else have family members who went through the Depression? Right? Do you remember what they were like? They kept buttons and tinfoil, and you had to eat every little thing. You didn't throw anything away. Wax paper, or brown paper bags, everything was kept and reused. And back then, if you called somebody long distance, right, you could only speak for 2 minutes. It was too expensive. Remember that, right? Telegrams, everything, you had to buy things on sale all the time, and you couldn't throw things away. Like, this was their reality, how they got through. And for some reason, my dial-up, and this is who we take ourselves to be. Our idea of ourselves can be so inaccurate, because my Depression-era community was in my head going, how dare you buy a ticket for a retreat to New York? Right? I got a lot out of that retreat. The teachers were fantastic, and the people, it was a wonderful, enriching experience. In that unconscious moment, I defied my relatives from the Depression, and I was a bad person. I was extravagant. So I took that extravagant me. I had no idea, by the way. This took me a while, right? This is deluded, right? So that extravagant me took myself on Amtrak and blamed Amtrak. Because my trip is bad because we have Amtrak and not those speed trains like in Japan or somewhere, right? Well, I'm muttering about Amtrak, making myself more and more aversive. And I want to tell you, there was nothing wrong with Amtrak. I met lovely people, 2.5 hours. I met all these wonderful, friendly people telling me their life story. And everybody helped me with my suitcase, getting it up and down. And I got a shuttle, and I got right on the plane, and everybody was friendly. But I lived in the world that Amtrak is the problem. Now, you could have a story like this. But what the Buddha points to is the illusions and delusions we can live in without knowing, right? And let's change it. Let's change Amtrak to immigrants, right? I don't like immigrants. Or I don't like people who have a different skin color or a different religion. Or I don't want people who are poor to live in my neighborhood because I paid this much for my house, so they shouldn't be here. It's the ground for aversion and the ground for rejection and the ground for greed, hatred, and delusion, right? And this is what the Buddha is trying to free us up from. And if we look at the world, our sweet, sad world, we are filled right now with greed, hatred, and delusion. And it feeds on itself, if you notice, right? We feed on it. We feed on it. And when I don't like immigrants or homeless people or somebody with a different skin color or religion or, I don't know, anything, I also feed off of not liking it. And I feed off of identifying with the group that agrees with me. So when we practice for the world. When we come here, we are coming for everyone. And that's why all of these teachings are so interesting, important, right? That we interest you and make it relevant and here now. Because, one day it's Amtrak, the next day more greed, hatred, and delusion, right? So I leave you with our 3 vocabulary words. Who can remember what they are? Food. Discernment. Metta Cognition. Right.